as always, folks, like I mentioned earlier on, really you have to look at all the different aspects. You can't just look at one or two. And really, it's about what you do and not really how you feel or how you look. In reality, if you are not intelligently applying all four of what we have here, what we call the fundamentals of healthy living, rest assured, it's just going to be a matter of time. You will succumb to one kind of health challenge or the other. Unless, of course, you've been endowed with genes from a planet called Krypton. But pretty much that's what's going to happen. We like to focus on three main aspects when we are teaching: how our bodies work, which is, of course, the most important thing. When people understand how their bodies work, they will be better equipped to make intelligent decisions about their health. Of course, that also includes what our bodies need to function. One follows the other, I believe. When we understand what our bodies need to function, again, we shall make the right decisions and, of course, the threats to our health. And in this lecture tonight, I think it's really apt because inflammation is rapidly being recognized as the fundamental factor behind most diseases today. We never thought it could be connected to heart disease. We never even thought it could be connected to cancer. But yes, we are beginning to see a very clear correlation between inflammation and all these chronic diseases. And so, of course, Dr. Marvin will be talking about this today, and we are, of course, as always very privileged to have him speaking on a topic like this. And so, Sherry, go ahead and introduce Dr. Marvin.
Okay, I'd be glad to. Just one moment. Let me click a few buttons here. Okay, David, what are you seeing on your screen?
I'm seeing the inflammation zone with Dr. Norman Marvin.
Perfect. Okay, good. Okay, yes, let me introduce Dr. Marvin to you. I would love to do that. Dr. Marvin received a degree in pharmacy and a doctor of medicine from the University of Kansas and has been in practice for over 50 years. After spending 18 years in general practice, he served 5 years as assistant professor in the Department of Family Practice at the KU Medical Center. After 5 years, he returned to private practice. Then, in 1988, he was asked to serve as department chairman of Family, Community, and Geriatric Medicine at Oral Roberts University School of Medicine in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He also was the host and teacher of his own radio program, What's Up, Doc? Too bad he didn't have webinars when he was doing that, huh?
Yeah.
He now speaks for many groups regarding the field of health and nutrition. He spends much of his time studying the newest literature in the field of health and longevity. Because of his medical background and his practicing as a family physician for over 50 years, he has found that his ability to interpret scientific materials and communicate this information to the average person as one of his greatest assets. With this in mind, and still employing many of his years of experience as a family physician, he has set a new goal of educating and sharing information with as many people as possible in an effort to help them improve the length and quality of their lives. And that is so in line with what our vision is here at Building Strength Webinar. We're just always so honored to have him join us. And one of the other things that David and I always say about Dr. Marvin is we call him our adult supervision. We often need that. So, Dr. Marvin, are you there?
Dr. Marvin.
Dr. Marvin. Oh, no. Okay, let me see if I can figure out what happened to him. I'm still showing him.
Yeah, he's still on.
Dr. Marvin, can you hear us? Type into the little typing box. I don't know why we're not hearing him because it's looking like he's still dialed in. Everything's fine.
Mm-hmm. Maybe I should call him or something.
With long-term use of anti-inflammatory drugs. Food is a drug. Let me tell you up front. Food is the most powerful drug you ever put in your body because it can control your genetic expression. There's no drug made that can control your genetic expression other than damage it. Food. Macronutrients. There's only 3 types of macronutrients, and that is carbohydrates, proteins, and fat. And that's going to be a shock to some people because fruit and vegetables are all carbohydrates. Proteins need to be low-fat proteins. And fats need to be monounsaturated fats. And there's reasons for that. We'll try to get into all those. The hormonal response from the above, insulin, glucagon, and eicosanoids, okay? The eicosanoids come primarily from the fat element. Now, how does that fit? You have a high carbohydrate meal, and your blood sugar is going to go up. And as soon as it goes up, your pancreas is going to excrete insulin, and your blood sugar is going to come down. How does it take the sugar out of the blood? It will store it. It will store your excess carbohydrates in your blood. We call that storage fat. Eating fat doesn't make you fat, insulin does. Proteins, glucagon. When you eat proteins, you promote glucagon. And when you eat fat, according to the right kind of fat, you'll increase your eicosanoids. Now, that doesn't say the good ones or the bad ones. We're going to get into that in a minute. Okay, here's those 3 hormones. Insulin is a storage hormone. I just shared that with you. Glucagon, mobilization hormone. And what that does, see, your brain consumes 70% of your blood sugar that's circulating in your body. It's ironic. Your brain is 3% of your body weight. It consumes 70% of your blood sugar. And let me tell you, it gets high priority because when your blood sugar drops too low after you've eaten a high carbohydrate meal, what happens? You get sleepy. First, you'll get hungry. And if you don't run and get some more carbohydrates, then you get sleepy. So your body has to mobilize something for your brain. Okay, if you didn't get any more sweets to bring the yo-yo of the insulin and blood sugar back into normality, your glucagon will work on the liver to release glucagon in a form called, in a manner called gluconeogenesis, which produces some glucose for your brain. Now, the eicosanoids are the master hormones like a computer. They control everything. It's ironic you've never heard of those, but they control everything in your body. What is the zone? The physiological state where hormones controlled by the diet are within ranges consistent with controlling silent inflammation. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the definition for wellness. It's a zone. You see, if you don't have enough of glucose, carbohydrates in your system, you're going to be in trouble. If you have too much, you're going to be in trouble. And this is where it's all controlled. And that is the zone, and that is the point for wellness. What causes silent inflammation? The perfect nutritional storm. We hear about the perfect storm. We're having the threat of a pandemic out of Mexico and all across the world.
Right.
That's a perfect storm of health. Now I'm talking about the perfect storm, nutritional storm. Increased refined carbohydrate consumption, increased vegetable oil consumption, like saffron, oil, sunflower oil, that's vegetable consumption. Decreased omega-3 consumption. Let me tell you, we'll get into this, but there's so much each one of these. Increased refined carbohydrates. Now, here's the question that lipid specialists ask people, lipid biochemists that I know. They'll ask somebody, which is worse, a sugar cube or the same weight of baked potato? Which is the worst for your body and for your zone? The answer is the baked potato, because the sugar cube is partly glucose, which goes right into your blood, but the other part is fructose, and fructose has to go through your liver to be metabolized, which slows down the process. However, the baked potato, when it hits the acid of your stomach, wham, it is glucose. So you'd better take a sugar cube than eat too big a baked potato, okay? Increased vegetable oil. All of our cooking, primarily, in this country is vegetable oil consumption. That stimulates bad eicosanoids. Now, decreased omega-3 consumption is something that is unbelievable how we've gotten away from it. 80 years ago, our diet was much different. Your grandparents, my grandparents, ate a different diet. They had different problems. One, there was hardly anybody obese at that time. Now, let's talk about omega. There's 3 types of omegas, lipids: omega-3, omega-6, omega-9. We'll get rid of omega-9 real quick. That's the same as olive oil, and you should be cooking with it. You should be cooking with it now. You see, the #1 healthiest nation in the world is not the U.S., it's France. And France doesn't spend a 10th or 15th or 20th as much on health care as we do. But they eat something we don't. 1, a high concentration of olive oil. 2, they drink a liquid that has a purple fruit behind it called a grape. Now, that has the hot topic you've heard about, resveratrol. But the second healthiest nation in the world is Italy. Now, where do we stand? We're 47th. We're 47th healthiest nation in the world because of what you're hearing tonight. And that's why we aren't healthy. It's the way we eat. We're in the land of plenty, and we're getting plenty sick from it. Decreased omega-3. 80 years ago, the ratio of omega-6, which is from, now we get it from processed food, increased vegetable oil consumption. We get omega-6 as an increased refined carbohydrates. That's an omega-6. The ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 80 years ago was 2 to 1. Do you know what it is today? It's 20 to 1. 20 for omega-6 versus 1 for omega-3. That lies a big problem. You see, the zone diet will control your eicosanoids. But if you can't stay on the zone diet, which I can't imagine anybody couldn't, then omega-3 will make up the difference because it will produce eicosanoids. But I recommend you not eat like you've been eating and then try to make it right with omega-3. And believe me, I want to say it up front, the only one to have is high-dose, high-refined omega-3 from fish, not from anything else, and I hope we'll have time to get into that. Good genes turning bad. Survival mechanisms in the past are now our problems. You see, when we were hunter and gatherers out here with a spear trying to pick the right vegetation to eat, we worked 14 hours a day to get our food. Now, in case you think that was the good old days, their average lifespan was 18 years. 18 years old was the average lifespan in the hunter-gatherer days. Okay? So what did they have to have? They had to have a mechanism to where they'd load up today on something and it could store. You could store protein as glycogen. You could store carbohydrates as fat because you might not find another place like that for maybe 3-4 days. You might not find anything to eat, depend on which part of the world you lived in. Now, all this was fine because, 1, they exercised more, and 2, they didn't have much more to eat for a few days, so they would eat and use that storage. Now, if they didn't, this would produce a strong inflammatory response. As I said, their lifespan average was 18. Our genes are still in the Stone Age, but we live in the 21st century. Your genes doesn't know that you've got a A&P or Whole Foods or someplace like that to eat. They just know that you're putting a lot different things in there that they were made to function with. Silent inflammation is a result of a growing disconnect of our diet from our genes. That's why our death rate is high. That's why many cancers are many more times. Let me tell you, when I graduated from medical school, cancer was the 8th leading cause of death. It's now 1 and 2 with heart disease. A few months, heart disease will be number 1. A few months, cancer will be number 1. That's why we're seeing so many cancer. It isn't better detection primarily. It's poor nutrition. Molecular pathway for increasing silent. Now this gets a little bit chemical, but not too bad. It's kind of descriptive. What we do, we eat linolenic acid in our diets. And we have a delta-6 desaturase inhibited by trans fats and DHA. Okay, it comes down here, then after this enzyme, we have gamma-linolenic acid, GLA. If you want to know what helps our body's health by eating oats, oatmeal, or Cheerios, it's the GLA with the other principles around GLA. Then that produces dihomo-gamma-linolenic acid, DGLA. Then that will go directly to produce good eicosanoids. The delta-5 desaturase is inhibited by glucogen and EPA, but activated by insulin. And here's where a high-carbohydrate diet goes amok, because the high-carbohydrate diet inhibits this enzyme. Activated by this enzyme. And when it's activated, it produces arachidonic acid, which invariably goes to bad eicosanoids. This you don't want. The bad ones are bad. The good ones are good. Okay? You can see that, and it probably won't mean a whole lot to you, but I want to show you there's a separation. And what's it determined by? It's determined by glucogen, carbohydrates, and fat. That makes the difference between the bad and the good eicosanoids. Delta-5 desaturase is controlled by dietary factors. Inhibitors, that EPA I talked about a while ago, in that ratio of AA over EPA. That's the eicosapentaenoic acid and the glucogen. It's activated by insulin. So activated by insulin, the more your insulin is produced, the more bad eicosanoids you have. Now here's the pattern we get in. When we are in such a way as we start taking too much carbohydrates in, particularly high refined, then we produce more and more insulin. And our cells, because we're storing tons of fat, our cells become more resistant to the effects of insulin. And then we develop insulin resistance, which by definition is type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is what inevitably will be produced. Okay, insulin is the culprit of producing it. Now in type 1, we don't produce any insulin. So that's the one difference between. Type 1, we don't produce enough insulin. Type 2, we produce too much, but we're resistant to it. Your first line of defense against silent inflammation, loss of inflammatory fat, also referred to in the literature as toxic fat. Okay. See, this isn't something just some off-the-wall dreamed up. This was Newsweek, April the 23rd, 2004. When fat attacks, how fat cells are waging war on your health. Why dieting is no magic bullet. Now, dieting, weight loss dieting doesn't work. I can tell you that. I don't care which one you want to talk about. You can fight and fight and fight, but pretty soon you're going to give up. They usually last 8 to 12 months at the most. Then what happens? You'll gain it all back.
Now,
We're going to go into some of these diets.
What
is the best diet? Somebody say something?
Yeah, I was just asking why don't they work? But you said you were going to go into it later.
Well, no one likes to give up food. No one likes starvation. No one likes hunger. So inevitably, they're not going to work. Now, athletes can get rid of extra fat. When a boxer goes into training, or football players, now football players don't usually get very obese, but they may have to drop 10 pounds. That will work. That's functionary dieting for a purpose. But I'm talking about a person that's, say, 60, 80 pounds overweight. They're going to struggle and fight, and inevitably they'll give up. This is the easy way to do it. Because, you see, this you don't have to be hungry. This you don't have to starve. Because this tells you the balance that you need to have. What's the best diet to reverse inflammatory silent inflammation? Okay, the glycemic index. We've heard lots about glycemic index. In 1980, it was first thought of in experiments. The measurement of postprandial glycemic responses. What they do is they give you a refined carbohydrate, and then they'll do a postprandial blood sugar. And they'll see how high your blood sugar goes, and the higher it goes, the higher the glycemic index. The more rapid it goes up, the higher the glycemic index. In 2003, it was widely ignored, still widely ignored. In 2008, it was acknowledged by the American Dietetic Association. Now, the glycemic index is not the whole answer. The glycemic load is the answer. Glycemic load predicts chronic disease. The glycemic load will predict your obesity, your type 2 diabetes, and your cardiovascular disease. Now, there's an article listed here of the current Athero Rep 4.54, 2002. That was the one that brought these out, that obesity is due to the glycemic load, type 2 is due to the glycemic load, and all CV disease also. Definition of glycemic load. How do you calculate it? Well, first you have to get, and it's easy to get off the internet, I have a briefcase full of glycemic index. What that helps you is to make selections. But it still doesn't tell you what you're going to eat, because I'll show you why that's different. The glycemic load is the glycemic index times the grams of carbohydrate you're eating per serving, divided by 100. That gives you the glycemic load. You see, say that David wants to have a piece of chocolate, and so he eats his lunch, and he leaves out all carbohydrates. And if he has the normal amount we're going to get into of meat, he can have that. So he's never starving for chocolate. You see, what causes most diets to fail, people get to eating, and they don't have some delicacy they like, and they just go up a wall. I have a book that tells you every fast food organization there is and what they serve that's in the zone. Food's everywhere in the zone. It's just that you have to eat it with discretion. If it's high carbohydrate, it's the quantity of balance that you have, and not that you can't have it. I have a friend, he can go so long without eating ice cream. And then all of a sudden he tells me he'll go get a gallon of ice cream and eat it one evening. Well, see, that's not very wise. You can have ice cream all along if you use this formula I'm giving you, because you can calculate it. Now, diet definitions. A very low glycemic load diet, you've heard about it. It's called the Atkins diet. The problem with the Atkins diet, there wasn't enough carbohydrates for the brain to function properly, and therefore you produce too much cortisol. And Dr. Atkins died from an injury, slipping on ice, but when they studied his body, they found out that a lot of things were due to cortisol secretion. So that's a very low glycemic load. Now, the problem with a low glycemic load in the Atkins diet, I can tell you right here because I've seen it in probably 300 patients, maybe more. Myself, I did it. And I lost 40 pounds. But what's typical is what happened to me. I lost 40 pounds, and when I come off of it, I starved for things. So in the next few months, I gained everything back and more because I wanted what I couldn't have on Atkins. Now, a moderate glycemic load, which you can select any food you want, but only with a balance in mind, and guess what that's called? The zone. A moderate glycemic load. Doesn't say no glycemic load. See, if you don't have any carbohydrates, you're in big trouble. If you have too much carbohydrates, you're also in big trouble. Moderation. The high glycemic load diet is the USDA American Heart Association. The U.S. Diabetic Association and the American Heart Association has a high glycemic load because the Heart Association has told us for years, stay away from fat. Don't eat those eggs. Don't eat that egg yolk. Don't eat those fats. The key is fats doesn't harm us, except if they're out of balance. Now, a very high glycemic load, I bet you couldn't guess what this is, the typical American diet. That's your 4 kinds of diets that is most popular. Now, there's variations of all of them, but I want to tell you, balance is the answer. And here's the balance. Controlling inflammation depends on the protein to glycemic load ratio. In other words, you should have protein at every meal, some, because it's a balance. Now, the hunter-gatherers didn't have it. Again, their life expectancy was 18. They go out here. They had only meat that a hunter-gatherer had was what he could either outrun or catch up to and throw a spear in. So he didn't eat meat very often. There wasn't a lot of animals that he could outrun. So here's where we are, the protein to glycemic load ratio. High glycemic load diets over on the left produces excess insulin production. This goes up. And the fat accumulates right here. The very low glycemic load, your blood sugar goes down, excess glucagon production, because that's what happens to give your brain the carbohydrates so you can still think, or you'll be asleep, and it increases your cortisol. Now, that is problems. This is a problem of one nature. This will lead to type 2 diabetes. This will lead to all kinds of chronic disease here. This will too. The middle is the zone. The insulin is balanced, and you lose all of your inflammatory fat. I don't know whether I had 27 pounds of inflammatory fat, but it went out the window so fast I didn't know what would happen. And my wife was taking something for weight loss. She wouldn't let me take it. She said, "You've lost too much weight already." So this is an easy, simple, rapid way to lose weight, and it's healthy. Carbohydrate confusion. High glycemic load diets increase insulin. We've talked about that, which gives you constant hunger. Well, guess what you do when you're constantly hungry? You increase your fat accumulation, which increases your inflammation. Insulin is what increases your inflammation. That's silent. Very low glycemic load diets increase cortisol. The brain requires adequate blood sugar. This increases cortisol production to stimulate gluconeogenesis, so there's some glucose going to your brain, which increases the insulin resistance and increases the inflammation. This is a simplified way of this all works, but it's factual, and this is what works. Protein power. Protein puts out a secretion. One of them is cholecystokinin, which shuts down your appetite. Increases glucagon secretion, stabilizes blood glucose levels. Satiety means you're not hungry. Increases PYY peptide secretion, which cuts down your hunger from your hypothalamus, and increases your feeling full, satiety. Another thing that these things all do is destroy other parts of your organs along the way. The zone diet is an anti-inflammatory diet. The USDA diet, at the best, only decreases inflammation -5. Percentage CRP production here, lowering of CRP, 0.5 with USDA, and the zone diet is -50. That's in JAMA magazine. The zone diet has had articles in JAMA about this.
Wow.
The zone diet is an anti-inflammatory diet. Key aspects: it's based on the glycemic load, balance of protein, carbohydrates, and fat. What drives physicians' interest in this? And believe me, there's a lot of interest. There's medical meetings going on now on the zone diet. One, it lets you diet without hunger. Does that sound good to anybody? Diet without hunger. Flexibility. If you want to eat something you're craving for, you can do it. You just have to balance it and make a provision for it in the way you eat the rest of your food. It's the moderate approach. You don't eat a gallon of ice cream one evening. Or as a friend of mine was telling me, he was buying a carrot cake, a nut carrot cake with walnuts. He bought it in this grocery store, and he said, "I can't wait for you to see that." Well, he left the grocery store and came home, and he said, I said, "Where's the carrot cake?" He said, "I ate it all in my car before I left the store." Well, that isn't the moderate approach. That's what too much of us are doing, eating too much of what we really like. You see, if you eat something as often as you want, you'll never crave it. What's the implications? This is the only diet you can live the rest of your life on, happy and at peace. Long-term compliance, and it's medically validated. Oh, really? Medically validated. Well, let's start right here. We'll start with Harvard, for example. 2005 dietary guidelines from the Joslin Diabetic Research Center at Harvard. Now, I don't know whether many of you know it. Joslin Diabetic Research Center is the gold standard in the treatment of diabetes. It's a branch of Harvard Medical School. And here's what they have. Here's what they say of the ideal diet. Dietary guidelines. 40% low glycemic load. 20 to 30% low-fat protein. 30 to 40% monosaturated fat. Well, folks, do you know what that's also called? It's not only called the Joslin Research Center Dietary Guideline, it's called the Zone Diet. Zone Diet. Now, translated in Harvardese, and I used to go back to Harvard every year for their medical update. It's the best medical meeting in the United States, in my opinion. It's a 2-week period, solid, clear through for 2 weeks of everything new in that year. And Harvardese is the way they make things simple. And they took that previous diet and said it's 1, 2, 3. Can't get any simpler than that. 1 gram of fat, 2 grams of protein, and 3 grams of carbohydrates. Now, you see, if David, using him as an example, wants a piece of chocolate, okay, well, he has to figure out the index for it. And he will eat a smaller piece than he would if he is eating another carbohydrate, such as celery or something else. You see, but it's moderation, but your craving is satisfied. Remember, 1, 2, 3. That's as simple as the Zone Diet. 1 gram of fat, this has to be monounsaturated. And one of them that my wife loves that I don't is avocado. That's loaded with the right kinds of fat. 2 grams of protein. Now, you shouldn't eat at any one 24 period a piece of protein bigger than the palm of your hand. If you had your fingers cut off, the same thickness as the palm of your hand, the same size. That'll give you a routine for 24-hour digestion of protein. 3 grams of carbohydrates, okay? Now, here's the zone food pyramid, okay? The vegetables. Here you can see lots of color. Asparagus, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, squash. These are the vegetables. These aren't the only ones you can have. These are an example. And then we get up here. What do we got here? Oh, we got fruits. Well, you can see all the fruits that are lined up here, including watermelon, which are glycemic, as you can well tell if you get an index. So that's the first two. Now, what are all these? They're all carbohydrates. Remember, we get 3 carbohydrates versus 2 protein, okay? Low-fat protein. Chicken breast, turkey breast, whatever meat you want. If you cook it right and dry it right, you can make it low-fat protein, or fish. Now, if you get fish, I want to warn you, you better get fish that you know something about. Don't buy pond-raised fish and eat them. Why? Because the stuff they feed them. You see, let me tell you, the problem with beef and some farm-raised fish is, if, for example, beef, if you want to fatten up a cow, you give it cereal grains and other carbohydrates. That's primarily what you feed them. Well, if you want to fatten up a person, you give them cereal grains and pasta and also nothing but maybe dense carbohydrates or ones that are complex carbohydrates, but you'll fatten them up too. Now, why should we be surprised of why we're getting fat? Because the way we eat. We don't think it's a surprise we can fatten up beef or fish fed grain. They used to brag about, I'm getting me a quarter of beef that's grain-fed. Well, whoopee, you'll look like you're grain-fed as soon as you get it eaten, because that's what happens. Now, okay, monounsaturated fats. Here we have an avocado. I don't know what this is, but this can be olive oil. Olive oil. I myself take a tablespoonful of extra virgin olive oil. You want to use, you're going to drink it, you want the extra virgin. Now, you know what extra virgin means? It's never been squeezed. And here's what happens. I was over in Israel, and I watched them pick these great big olives. They're about the size of our blue plums. And they put them in buckets. By the time they got the bucket full, there was an inch or an inch and a half to 2 inches of oil in that bucket from the weight of the olives above it. They pour that out. That is extra virgin. The rest of these olives are squeezed in a press. And that is the olive oil that we cook with. If you want to drink it, have extra virgin olive oil. I take a tablespoon a day. It's wonderful. Now, how do you tell whether you got the real McCoy? There's a peppery taste that you'll get when it hits your soft palate and your throat. It'll sting just a little bit, very minor, but you can tell the sting's there. If that isn't there, you didn't get extra virgin. And here's the grains and starches. So use it in moderation, because this is exactly what fattens up old Bessie out here in the feedlot, and it'll fatten up Maud every time she cooks that stuff. So I always told people, when you go into a restaurant, tell the waitress to take all the rolls back with her. But maybe you aren't ready for that yet, but if you get on this balance, you won't want them. Your final defense against silent inflammation, high-dose fish oil, omega-3. And what it does, it will control good iconosoids to some extent, but you can't depend on it entirely because you can't live on it. Now, here's the eicosanoids that I just wanted to talk about. Prostaglandins. Now, that was the first of these eicosanoids found. And they found them in the prostate, so they thought that's the only place they got them. So they call them prostaglandins. Now we know they're all over your body, made, in your joints. That's why arthritis people have, anti-inflammatories that gives them relief, because it cuts down the prostaglandins. The thromboxanes are what controls blood clots. The leukotrienes what causes pain with inflammation, and etc. This one's the one that gives you the munchies and makes you want to eat. It makes you fatter than you'll be able with the others. And there's more than this. This just gives you a sampling. Age management requires eicosanoid balance. Good eicosanoids, here's what they do. Here's why it's important to get on the zone. Good eicosanoids inhibit platelet aggregation. And that plays a part in heart attacks and strokes because it causes blood clots. Inhibits platelet aggregation. Vasodilators. It dilates your small blood vessels, give you more stamina, give you better function. Let me tell you, the best thing that athletes can do is get on the zone, and I'll tell you that if I got time. Anti-inflammatory. They're all anti-inflammatory, the good ones are. What's ironic, we take the non-steroidals and aspirin and wipe out these and the bad ones also, but these ones would shut down the inflammation somewhat. Control cellular proliferation. That's important in malignancies. Enhance immune function, which Dr. Murray is going to well describe tomorrow night, or Thursday night. Enhance immune function. Okay, let's see what the baddies do. Of course, if this one inhibits platelet aggregation, this promotes platelet aggregation. Vasodilation, vasoconstriction. Anti-inflammatory, pro-inflammatory. Controls cellular proliferation, increases cellular proliferation. And enhance immune function, suppresses immune function. There's it in a nutshell, why we desperately need to get on the zone. Some clinical examples. Now, I'm going to convince you this is the best way to lose weight ever come down the pike. Are you ready for this? I could show pictures, but because of model releases, I didn't want to do it, and I didn't have that. There's Dr. Sears, who invented the zone diet, looked all over the world to find the fattest man he could find. Emmanuel Irby in Mexico City was the man. He weighed 1,232 pounds. Hadn't been able to walk for 7 years. Was bedbound. He was in the process of dying. They wanted to do a gastric bypass. He refused it because some friends of his had died after. The physiology is distorted, and they died within months, 6 months to a year later for the gastric bypass and morbid obesity. So he didn't want that. So he gladly went on the zone with the fish oil addition. Now, after 18 months, his weight had decreased to a little under 800 pounds. Now, that's 400 pounds in 18 months. There isn't anybody within the sound of my voice has ever done that on any diet. It is expected after 5 total years on the zone diet, he will be at 200 pounds, his normal weight for his skeletal and size. Now, his laboratory findings, let me show you. Now, a doctor walking into a room to see a 1,232-pound male would look at, this is a pathology phenomenon. This is a museum of pathology. Not quite so. Let's look at his lab. After 18 months, his cholesterol was 190. His HDL was 55. That's the good cholesterol. His triglyceride was 45. His blood pressure was 120/70. Never see that in that heavy a man, anybody that isn't on it. Blood sugar was 88, and his heart rate was 62. This is all normal for a 200-pound man in 18 months. This man has got energy. Now, he couldn't exercise because of his weight and size. If I had his picture, you'd see it. So they made him a bicycle with the pedals, handholds, that he could turn the wheel with his hands, and he exercised with that in bed, and it was above him on the bed, hanging down, and he would exercise with it. And he stayed on the zone diet with fish oil supplementation. Now, if that isn't a significant amount, do you remember the Sago mine disaster a few years ago back in West Virginia, where there's like, I think it was 26 men died of carbon monoxide because it wipes out your brain and your liver and your kidney function? Well, they found one man alive, and it was a man named Randy McClone. Here's his MRI showing shrinkage of his brain. Now, every doctor in the world will say, that liver straightened out. That's terminal. Here's more evidence of it, and here's his further studies. This man, there was a CNN presentation calling him a miracle man. And here he is. There's Randy McCloy and his wife. Since getting rehabilitated through the zone diet and the fish oil, they've had a baby. He's normal, back at work, totally functioning. He had brain failure, as you saw in the shrinkage of his brain, heart failure, kidney failure, and liver failure. This is his doctor. And he was told, his medical school in West Virginia, told him he had only weeks to live. He would never know, he told his wife he'd never know anybody or function. Now, he's the sole survivor of the Sago-Man mine disaster. There's Dr. Sears, this Randy's doctor, and his wife and he. He no longer has either one of these four things. His liver is rehabilitated, his kidneys straightened out, his heart is normal, and his brain is functioning.
That's amazing.
Clinical
long?
benefits of just high-dose fish oil with the zone diet. This is imperative. We have gotten away from zone diet for sure, but we've also gotten away from fish oil. I did my senior thesis, of which in medical school where I went, we had to write a paper our senior year, and I did it on those people that had the least heart attacks in the world. And it was primarily on Eskimos. Now, in contradistinction to what the American Heart Association diet says, these people live on fat. And they tell you, stay away from fat, no fat, can't have any fat in your diet. I was told that when I had my bypass. But I had written a paper my senior year on Eskimos, and what don't they have? They don't have heart disease, they don't have high blood pressure, they don't have any of these you see before you. And they live entirely on fat. Now, you say, why don't we go up there and live? It'd kill most of us. Why? Because there's enough vitamin A, we'd have toxicity, liver toxicity from it. They are born there and live there eating fat from babies, and their enzyme systems modify. But here's what fish oil has shown in people who eat lots of fish oil. Its benefits are heart disease disappears, cancer, depression, ADD, multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's. Have you ever seen an Alzheimer Eskimo? No, you haven't. Brain trauma, chronic pain, no osteoporosis, no skin disorders, fertility is established, and fat loss. As I say, fat will go without you worrying about it. It just disappears. That's due to high-dose fish oil. Now, when I used to go to Harvard for medical update, they were making their own omega-3. And they told us that they had to go 400 miles offshore to find fish that didn't have cadmium and mercury and some other heavy metal contamination. Because you see, when you deal with it, the first way they made omega-3 was compression. They squeezed the oil out of them. Well, they did that with cod. See, that's why you had cod liver oil. All right? Now, nowadays you can't do that because you'd have enough that would be poison toxic to you with all the contamination. So now they do molecular distillation of omega-3. And if you want to go on zoneliving.com, that's zoneliving.com, you can see there's an omega-3 RX. That's prescription-grade omega-3 oil that has more EPA and DHA than any other product there is, and I've checked them all. And if you want to write this down, you can check it on your omega-3. Omega RX has 1,600 EPA. It has 800 DHA. So just check that on anybody's, and it'll prove that that's the best one. I take 3 of those a day. Okay. How much omega-3 fats do we need along with the zone diet? Maintenance of wellness. People that are well, 2.5 grams per day. Treat obesity, diabetes, or heart disease, congestive heart disease, or, 5 grams a day. Treat chronic pain, 7.5 grams a day. Backache, joint ache, you name it, pain, along with the zone diet. Treat neurological problems, greater than 10 grams per day. That's not hard to get. I get more than 2.5 because I take 3 capsules. And then I take a tablespoonful of the Omega RX oil itself. It didn't taste bad. It had a little lemon taste to it. So anyhow, that's how much omega oil fats you need. In case you're trying to write that down, I'll leave it on there a little bit. You can find most of this out at zoneliving.com. I'm not selling it. I don't sell anything on webinars. The amount of omega-3 fats needed is dependent on insulin control. The more you control your insulin, the less omega-3 fats you need. The less you control your insulin, the more omega fats you need. How do you control your insulin? Simple. By balancing your carbohydrates, your protein, and your fats. 1, 2, 3. 3 for the carbs, carbohydrates, 2 for the proteins, and 1 for the fats. Controlling silent inflammation requires a multifactorial approach. Zone diet reduces arachidonic acid. I've told you that. It reduces the insulin secretion. It reduces intake of omega-6 fatty acids. Omega-6, you never want to buy a product that contains omega-6 fatty acid. Why? Because you're getting too much of it. Remember 20 to 1 in our present diet? It should be 2 to 1. So you're getting way more than this unless you're on the zone diet than you should have. EPA dilutes out AA, that's arachidonic acid, in the membranes of your cells. Decreases likelihood that AA will be made into pro-inflammatory eicosanoids. See, it cuts that down. It decreases that. That only is an aid to your zone diet. Modulating the innate immune system. Downregulation of inflammation and upregulation of anti-inflammation, or your immune system. Here's a powerful message. Believe me, I've done lots of research. I did a DVD on nutrigenomics. That was about 2 years ago. Now it's very common. I've got article after article after article stating this. Diet can turn on genes that control cellular rejuvenation. Diet can turn off genes that control cellular inflammation. Now, diet is the only safe way you can control your genetic makeup. There's no other way found. And I don't believe you ever will find it, because I believe God made our bodies this way that our food would control our genetic expression. Convergence of diet and genomics. That's your genome. 400 million years of coevolution of genes and nutrients, whether they were started in moss or whether the genes started in the worm or some kind of goo somewhere. I believe man was created, but I'm telling you, as the beginning of all the genes that we've been able to study, it's very similar. You'd be totally flattened to know that 98% of many, many things have the same genes that we do. They're expressed different, and we still have the 2% that controls, and then we have the eicosanoids that take care of the rest. The interaction of nutrient storage, metabolism, and inflammatory response is all done by diet. Interaction of nutrient storage, metabolism, and inflammatory response. Deeply embedded in our genes is the control we're looking for. The immune system components, innate. The innate immune system is the primitive one. It's nonspecific, and you'll hear about that tomorrow night. Based on pattern recognition, responsive to diet. Adaptive immune is highly specific. Based on antibody recognition, you develop antibiotics to different organisms, and that's specific. Requires activation by innate system, little impact by diet. So this adaptive is little impact by diet, except you'll be healthier, but this is totally responsive to diet. That's the difference. You'll hear more about that Thursday night. The primary players, the innate immune system, toll-like receptors, genetic transcription factors. And this is some chemistry here. They're pro-inflammatory. This is anti-inflammatory. These are chemical names, and you'll probably hear about that from Dr. Murray. Now, this isn't anything I'm going to spend any time on, but I'll show you that this does mean there's a complication that we have to watch with our lipoproteins or lipopolysaccharides and all these different things that we're eating, but suffice it is 1 for fats and 2 for proteins and 3 for carbs. Nutrigenomics made simple. It may not seem so simple. Cytokines here, and the anti-inflammatories here. And this is how the inflammation and enzymes work all together from nutrigenomics. Dietary modulators of the innate immune system. Toll-like receptors, saturated fats activate. Cytokines induced by silent inflammation. Alpha and gamma, PPAR, is omega-3 fatty acids, activate them. This is the bad one that causes inflammation, and that's inhibited by omega-3 fatty acids, polyphenols, which are oxidants, and the zone diet. AMP kinase, I'm not going to spend any time on this. We're getting lack of time. Let me see how our time is. Oh my, yes, we're getting low on time. Zone management pyramid. Hormone replacement drugs, nutritional supplements, exercise, and meditation. Meditation on what you're eating is what this means. The zone diet, oops, I got to go back. The zone diet, high-dose fish oil, antioxidants. You can use polyphenols, or you can, take a juice glass of wine mid-morning and one mid-afternoon. And then all this adds into the zone management pyramid. Successful aging followed an anti-inflammatory diet for a lifetime. Eat small meals, but eat 5 a day. That's the first recommendation. 3 meals and 2 snacks. Now, I don't do that. You can or can't. I eat a larger meal, but I eat at zone. Have some protein at every meal. It stops your appetite. Eat low glycemic load carbohydrates, primarily vegetables with limited fruits. Control insulin and provide polyphenols from the fruits and the veggies. Restrict omega-6 fatty acid intake. That's processed food. That's complex carbohydrates. Choke off the arachidonic acid formation. Take your fish oil. I had a grandmother. Every time I go visit her, she'd say, Norman, I think you look like you need some cod liver oil. And here she'd come with that humongous spoonful of goo that tasted terrible. And I'd choke that down. And I got so I'd try to sneak in or stay outdoors as long as I could when my folks would take me down to see her. So I didn't like cod liver oil. Little did I know that was healthy. The fish oil dilutes out existing arachidonic acid, alters gene transcription, alters ion channels, cell-to-cell communication, and alters membrane fluidity. Chronic disease, what's below the surface? You see, everything below the surface is the problem. Autoimmune, neurological problems, heart disease, aging, and cancer. You can see these, but what's below the surface is silent inflammation. 21st century, age management medicine. Reduction of silent inflammation. This is the next big avenue for medicine. Less pharmaceuticals and more natural control by how we eat and fish oil. Hormonal control by the zone diet. Diet will be the primary drug. Your diet is the most potent drug you've ever put in your body. High-dose fish oil will be key. Return to Hippocrates, the father of medicine. He said, let your food be your medicine and let your medicine be your food. And it still holds, and it will always hold. And that's the end of my presentation. Right there.
Wow, great.
David?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, thanks so much.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Marvin. This has been very, very informative. Oh, I tell you, information is, the more I listen, the more I study this, it's just amazing just how pervasive inflammation is in health and living and disease. Golly. Well, folks, I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. We have questions. Sherry, you have any questions? Sherry, you want to try some, and then we'll just go back and forth.
Okay, let me see. Dr. Marvin, you had mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that a mile of blood vessels, how many miles of blood vessels there are in a pound of fat. Can you repeat?
1 pound. What?
Can you repeat?
1 pound of 1 pound of fat is 6/10 mile of blood vessel.
Okay, 6/10 of a mile.
Right.
Oh,
1
okay.
pound.
Okay, we were thinking you said 6 miles.
No, that's 10 pounds.
Got it. Okay.
10 pounds is 6 miles. 100 pounds is 60 miles. And you know, it's just like a town. I used to be mayor of a little town in western Kansas, and we discovered that the more people that got in the town, the higher we had to build the standpipe for water to get enough pressure to pump it through. Well, the thicker your heart muscle has to get to pump through all that fat. Can you imagine what Emmanuel Irby at 1,232 pounds, how much his heart was working? He was on the verge of dying because he couldn't pump. You figure up, write down 1,200 and multiply it by 610 and see how many miles he was pumping blood. Now what happens when you lose weight? All those fat-containing blood vessels collapse and they're shunted off. And that really relieves people. That's why many people lose weight. They can get off their oral medication for diabetes. Why? Because that's what's causing it, it's obesity. I've had probably 100 people lose weight one way or another, and their blood sugar returned to normal. They'd been diabetic for 6 to 8 years. Lose the weight, you no longer have type 2 insulin-resistant diabetes. And the same thing with high blood pressure. Lose the weight, you get off your blood pressure medicine. You see, we've been using these artificial means when we could do a more natural means by doing it and how we eat. And you'll enjoy it more. It'll cost you less. If you haven't priced drugs lately, think about that. Eat right, you won't have to take them. And you'll be younger. You know, the only downside to this is you'll think better, you'll get more trim, you'll have more energy. That's the only downside I can think of.
That's a really bad downside.
Yeah, you won't be a couch potato or a sloth, you know.
You won't have any excuses anymore for staying at home.
That's right.
Okay, someone asked, and I know I've mentioned this to you personally before, but she says, how does green-lipped mussel omega-3 compare with fish oil?
Well, I know about that whole thing. That's on the East Coast. There's no research been done. But here's the thing. That comes from New Zealand. And there's more disease in New Zealand than there is in Antarctica where the Eskimos are. So I'll go with fish oil.
Okay.
You see what I mean? There's never been a population that's been used. Okay, why does Japan have hardly any heart disease until they come to the United States and eat what we're eating here? Within 2 years, they're back in our same incidence of heart disease. Over there, they aren't. Why is one of the blue zones Okinawa, where they routinely live over 110 years of age? They're living in the blue zone. They're living in an inflammatory zone. They live the zone life over there and don't even know about it. It's just the way they are. And they never eat Irish potatoes. Somebody brought over a sweet potato into Okinawa and told them they might try to grow it for food, and the thing grows better there than it does in China, and they're all living on a lot of sweet potatoes. And they live on about 3-2-1. The fat they eat is from fish. And they live so long they practically have to club them to death to get them to die.
You're too funny. Okay, I'm going to ask you another question. Okay, this person says, if I use fresh ground raw sunflower seeds as a base for dips, spreads, etc., will that give me too much omega-6 oil? Should I use walnuts?
Yeah, I mentioned saffron oil and sunflower oil produces arachidonic acid. I wouldn't do that.
Okay.
If you want to fix a dip, use avocado. You don't like avocado?
I love avocado, and we have the best ones here in California.
I know you do. I know you do. My wife starts mouth-watering when she flies over. Thinking what she's going to do when they get on the ground. She will eat a lot of avocado. And that's a monounsaturated fat, and it's wonderful for you. Don't tell any cardiologist because they'll say it's got too much fat in it.
Right.
But it's fat that doesn't hurt you.
Right. Now, if you fry olive oil, would that make it really bad for you, or it's still?
Yeah, you don't get trans fats in cooking with olive oil because you eat it, you don't reuse it. You see?
Even if you
the
fry
problem
it?
with, well, when you stir fry or something like that, you eat it. You don't pour it out and reuse it because it goes into veggies.
Right, but it doesn't change the molecular structure of it or something that's more harmful?
No.
Okay.
Cooked once doesn't change the molecular stature.
Okay. What about
It's
krill?
repeated cooking. You know, the fast foods places got in trouble with trans fats. One, they were using lard, and at the best they were using some of these vegetable fats, but they were using it over and over and over in French fries. And that does change it. And that is the cause of the bad eicosanoids. Trans fat is.
Okay.
See, this explains why things are bad and why other things are good.
Right, right. What about krill oil?
Krill oil, well, I tell you, Dr. Sears bought a bunch of land up in Canada, and he was trying to get the corner on krill oil because he did research on krill oil. He's a lipid biochemist. And he figured the krill oil, he'd get the corner on it. He and his brother bought a lot of land up there, and they were farming krill. But they found out that that didn't work as good on people as fish oil. Because, again, look at it practically. You don't have a population that's living like the Eskimos and the Japanese and the Okinawans. That's a good test for fish oil. And there was no test for krill oil. But he tried and tried. I think he spent 2 years trying to make krill oil equivalent to omega-3. He couldn't. He couldn't do it. And let me tell you, invariably, you can look at the healthy people, and somewhere in their food, there's fish. Now, to get the fish oil that I'm taking, you'd have to eat about 55 pounds of fish a day. You can't do that. But you see, I'm old and shriveling up fast, and what I'm doing is taking fish oil by the concentrated, purified, molecularly distilled, so I can catch up on all that I should have been eating for years. Okay? Salmon is wonderful. Mackerel is great. Cold water fish produce the most omega-3. Why is that? Because the fish gets cold in the cold water, and therefore they have genetically been changed to store more fat. That's fish oil. That's why the colder the water, the better the omega-3. And, you know, because of toxicity in the water, they have to molecularly distill it. Krill doesn't work as good as fish oil.
Okay.
There's a textbook I have called Omega-3 RX. An entire book is on omega-3. I've done a couple of telephone conferences on omega-3. I think, didn't I do a webinar on omega-3?
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
Fatty acids, yeah.
Yeah. I did a webinar on omega-3. I've studied omega-3 from one end to the other, and there's tons of literature. And by the way, in case you think eicosanoids is just something fly-by-night, there's 87,000 papers written on eicosanoids, and there's hundreds of them found, and there's more every month, and every year there's more eicosanoids found. And more it's proving that our bodies are totally controlled with that. In other words, when you have thyroid problems, you've got some problem with an eicosanoid that stimulates their production, coming through TSH or something else. Okay.
I have someone from, I think it's Valerie. She says, "Thank you, Dr. Marvin. We love you and all your expertise."
Huh. Thank you very much, Valerie.
And we have other people saying, applause, applause, fabulous. Thank you, thank you.
Well, I really appreciate it. This is my life now. I study and do research on these topics of anti-aging, and I'm a little selfish in that because I'm trying to outrace my body's aging by eating right for one time in my history. I've been on this about a year, And I couldn't feel better. I have more energy. I have more stamina and exercise. And exercise helps because exercise helps cut down your carbohydrates in your blood. But I prefer not to put too many in there. But again, you don't have to deprive yourself on the zone diet. As I said, when I go with my daughter up to Mayo Clinic, I take my little book on what to eat. And I go into a fast food place. There's the things in that organization that I can eat and stay on the zone. I eat that and on I go. And it's wonderful. I feel like a new person.
It doesn't
I'm out
seem
here
like
avoiding all over my yard.
it doesn't seem like it's too much stress to follow this diet at all.
No, there's no stress at all, and there's no hunger. And you can have anything you want if you take it in moderation, balanced with your protein and fat. Now, Harvard has proved this. I want to tell you something about exercise. He took the swim team at UCLA, and there were 70 members, and he got each one of them to go on the zone. Okay, every year they would be second or third in the organization UCLA was in competition. One of the Texas schools was in it, and they never had beaten Texas. So that year, way ahead of time, a year ahead, he took the whole team, educated them, put them on this, and that year they beat Texas. And the next 5 years they beat Texas, and the end of that 5 years they won the gold medal in the Olympics. Never had done it in UCLA history. And they were all 5 years on the zone diet.
Wow.
That'll show you. And there's case after case after case. You see, the bad thing about athletes, they're told to carbohydrate load. That cuts down your performance. Mm-hmm. That cuts down your performance. The theory is an error because they take what?
Go ahead, sorry.
If they eat a big bowl of pasta the night before a race, and they're exhausted because they've got a blood sugar going up and down like a yo-yo. And that's all been proved. Harvard proved it. There's 3 medical schools. And by the way, I have a patient here in Kansas City, a friend of mine who I know very well, and she was taken up there because she had a real weird endocrine problem with her adrenals and her thyroid. She couldn't find help here. The doctors here, endocrinologists, sent her up there. The chief of endocrinology at Mayo Clinic saw her and told her what she had. And do you know what he did? He put her on the zone diet when she come home. She hadn't heard of it. She asked me about it. I hadn't heard of it at that time. I stumbled onto this in a thrift store in Honolulu, killing time in a thrift store, and saw the anti-aging zone. And I got it, I think, for $25 or 50 cents, and then read it, and it just changed my life.
Is there still a free book that people can get from Dr. Sears' website? You had mentioned that on one other webinar.
Yes. Here's what you do. I'm glad you mentioned that's a great idea. If you will get on zoneliving.com and find the phone number for Dr. Sears' organization and call them, order a bottle of Omega RX, and ask them for the free book. The latest is they have about 8 books they'll give you a choice, and they'll send it to you free. And I would recommend you get Enter the Zone. Enter the Zone. That would be my, if you've never read about the zone, I've read all 9 books. And if you've never read a book, read that one. And then if you want to go on it and get it, then what you do is to get what to eat in the zone. And that's what I carry with me when I travel, so I can eat in McDonald's. Absolutely. In McDonald's, there's 2 or 3 things you can eat on the zone. And every other fast food, there's something is zonable.
With French fries on the zone?
I don't think so, Dave.
Well, they're carbs, you know. Sure, you can have some French fries, but you got to balance them. You know, you got to balance it. And the burger isn't low-fat protein.
No.
No. But, you know, you can get protein, and but you see, there's different things you can do. I don't have it right here. I'd read off some of the things you could get in McDonald's, but every fast food has a place. Quiznos has several. Of course, you can eat in Subway.
Mm-hmm. That's my.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
You know that fellow there that lost 200 pounds or something?
Mm-hmm.
You remember in Subway?
Jared.
Well,
yeah.
Well, how did he do it? Zone.
Mm-hmm.
Zone's the answer for weight loss. There's nothing even touches it. And I used that case of Emmanuel Irby to prove it.
Mm. Wow.
When you can lose, 400 pounds in 18 months, nothing else will match that. That's physiological. That's the way our bodies are made.
Mm-hmm. Someone asked a question about how much mercury is in fish oil. I mean, how big a problem is mercury in fish?
Well, when you concentrate it like the omega RX, there's way too much fish mercury. It all depends on how much you eat of it. It's like saying how much cyanide you want to eat. Well, it's a problem unless you get special, fish, North Sea fish, and it'll usually say on it, molecular distilled. That's the only thing I take of omega-3. Whole Foods is a store that has things that are healthy. And that last time I was in Whole Foods, there was 12 different omega-3s that were molecularly distilled. However, it's not as concentrated as I read you on mine. I'm holding in my hand the omega RX, and it's a concentrate of EPA and DHA. 1,600 milligrams of EPA, and DHA is 800. No one else has any of them on the market that high. Now, I know Omega Pro, which is put out by Vitacost, or Nordic Naturals, puts out, but that isn't that strong. I'd rather have the stronger one. It just gives you more protection. It's not that much more. And because I never recommend anything that I don't take, I bought a bottle of the plain oil and take it by the spoonful. That isn't bad at all either. And by the way, extra virgin olive oil is delicious. My wife doesn't think it's delicious when she sees me take it, but it is.
Valerie, the colostrum lady from Canada, sends her hugs.
Oh, good. I know Valerie. Thank you, Valerie. Love you. She's a sweetheart. She made her living collecting colostrum from dairies. She collects 100 pounds of that a day.
Wow.
But she doesn't do that anymore.
Dr. Marvin, somebody was asking about artificial sweeteners and flavors and preservatives and how they affect the equation for health. Do you have a comment on that?
They're not good. Artificial sweeteners and all that, have chemicals in there that will disturb your physiology. Now, some people react to it because of genetic predisposition in a different way than others do. Because I've had people that had regular neurological problems and were diagnosed as having Parkinsonism. And what we found out is once we stopped their artificial sweeteners, they were normal. They were having trouble talking. They were having trouble walking. That's artificial sweeteners. No, I think that it's best to just, if you want to, use some sugar. Remember I told you, use sugar. Use a sugar cube. It's better than that same quantity of baked potato. People don't look at it that way. They'll say, well, I'm not going to eat any sugar. Give me that baked potato. Well, that baked potato probably represents more sugar than you would eat. So I'd use sugar.
I guess that goes with diet sodas as well, right?
Yes. That's what's in diet sodas, artificial sweetener.
So it's better to take the real soda. than
Sure.
the diet one. Okay.
Yeah. See how much sugar's in it and make allowance for it, and you're fine. Now, people get in trouble with weight. I used to take care of a manager for Coca-Cola here, and he told me that every time they increased the sugar content of Coke, they sold millions and millions of dollars.
Really?
And at the time, he said, you know, all the industry are a little concerned because we're worrying about making a hole big enough so it'll pour, because we're edging toward maple syrup in many of our regular diet sodas, or not regular sodas, not diet. So that means they're putting more and more sugar because it sells better. Well, here's the answer. If they're putting more and more sugar, eat less and less of it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You know.
Hard to do, though, especially if you've been raised with a sweet tooth.
My good friend, Dr. Elliott, up in Nebraska, he's now in Arizona, he used to say, is it worth dying for?
Mm-hmm.
Every time somebody wants something to eat. See, you can have a Coke, a regular Coke. Just balance it. Make sure you eat it along with something to balance that sugar surge in your insulin production. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You're outsmarting, you know, your diet because you're balancing it.
Well, I think that pretty much wraps up the questions for tonight. And
good. Will there be anything available if somebody wants it from this recording?
Well, we had a little bit of technical difficulty at the beginning and paused the recording, and we're a little bit delayed resuming the recording. So we have the bulk of it recorded. We'll just have to listen to it and see, but it's mostly recorded.
Okay. I could fill in what you don't have.
Okay. We may have to just do a re-recording. But
I could easily fill in because Ward and I are good friends, and he has a whole setup. I've done that for him.
Oh, yeah, that's true. We still have the slides. Yeah, so, yes, but it may take a little bit longer than usual, but at some point, somehow, some way, it will be available.
Okay. Well, we could do that real easy, Ward and I.
Okay, great. So would you like Sherry to just send you the recording and then you just fill in the rest? Oh,
yeah, we can.
Or I can send it to Ward.
Yeah, send it to Ward.
Okay, we'll do that.
And make a note on it, and he'll get a hold of me, and I'll go out there and record it.
Great. Well, again, Dr. Marvin, thank you so much. You have been such a tremendous blessing to us and to thousands of people, really, with your education and your heart for helping people. So
thank you. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
No, absolutely. We're going to get you back on very soon, too.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
And folks, thanks, Marvin.
Folks, you have a great night, and you be sure to be on for Dr. Murray's presentation on Thursday. It's going to be good. And look out for the emails. Have a good night. Bye.
Good night.